My Borrowed Son. Chapter 16. Friends and Curiosities. Parker couldn't believe it. Within such a short amount of time, he suddenly had a dozen followers and friends on his page. Sure, he didn't know them personally, but everyone was welcoming and polite. Two things he was eager to report to his mom when she expressed concern. The minuscule boy also made sure his mom knew he was being safe, not giving out too much personal information, and that the topic of his condition hadn't even been brought up. One person commented on his profile picture being interesting, which was a picture of Parker standing in front of his computer screen, but he just explained it was a background, and that he wanted to showcase the platform he was publishing on. Carl was the kid's name, and evidently he and Parker were the same age. All in all, Parker was pleased with his interactions and the people he was meeting. Lots of them had advice and things for him to check out, and he liked all of the things he was seeing. There were sketches of space and vast mountains, as well as the everyday interactions. There were hundreds of stories from writers just like him. It felt nice. It felt like some kind of community with people supporting and helping one another. A sense of satisfaction filled the young teen every time he checked his notifications and saw he was getting the chance to meet someone new. "Just look here, Mom," said Parker eagerly as he showed his mom the latest post he made. "It has almost 15 likes. He looked up into his mom's features and saw her beaming with pride. "That's so great, Parker," she complimented. "Are you going to post your latest story from Mr. Tamplin's class?" "I think so. I don't know yet, though. It doesn't feel done," he replied, feeling his cheeks getting warm. The latest story he came up with for Mr. Tamplin's class was a fiction fantasy story about a sprite named Talel. It essentially was his backstory for the Dungeons & Dragons campaign he and his friends started. Basically, he was a small fairy-like person who was a poison master for his people until he decided he wanted to go out adventuring and exploring. The dungeon game master said it was fine if he played a smaller character, thankfully not requesting why he would want to do such a thing, and found a special class for him to play as. The story actually won a Young Adult Author Award for his class, and Parker had Mr. Tamplin to thank since it was he who tutored him through his writing slumps. He was now refining it for his literature class. "Well, don't be scared to post it, sweetie. You're such a great writer, and can do whatever you set your mind to," encouraged his mom. "Now, before you get sucked into checking your notifications, finish your homework and get ready for bed. You have a long day tomorrow." "Yes, Mama," Parker replied, rolling his screen back into place in the main area. The structure walls rumbled as his mom closed the outside walls to his home. It was hard to believe it had been a whole month since he moved in to this new space. Parker loved it, in a weird way. Not to sound ungrateful, but having his own space to roam around, especially in a space that felt suited to him, made him feel just a little bit normal. He liked that he was usually at eye level with his mom instead of having her loom over him. Just the thought made him shudder involuntarily, and he wasn't sure why. It made him feel guilty every time the sensation seized him. But now was not the time to dwell on that. It was time for bed. Parker walked into his room and rummaged through his dresser to find his oversized space t-shirt and elastic band sleep shorts. Then he went back to the computer and finished submitting his assignments. The words filled the page, and Parker hoped that his paper on the evolution of technology was going to be good enough to get him the grade he needed. Parker's other assignments were a breeze. Math was simple enough, and the biology project about documenting the growth of plants was going smoothly. It was his other project, his story for his literature course, that he was worried about. It was his same story that he was using for his channel, but it was more a mild fear of rejection and lack of perfection. His online friends liked it, but would his teacher, his followers? Parker sighed and leaned against the wall before slinking down further into the chair. His eyes focused on the blinking line in front of him as he stared at the end of the 5th chapter he had been editing. Something about this story felt particularly personal, but Parker remembered hearing once about how writers put more of themselves than they're aware of when they're making characters and stories. Perhaps this was just part of that feeling. The teen sighed and stretched when, suddenly, his lights flickered up above him. Confusion injected itself into his mind as he stared at the wired lights on the ceiling. His eyes flicked over to the wall switch. Perhaps just a fluke? The notion was dismissed when the lights flickered 2 more times, all of his lights dimming and glowing systematically. Something raised the hair on the back of Parker's neck. He felt like he was on pins and needles, the anticipation of a drop while suspended in midair. Cautiously, the curious teen stood up and walked over to the switch, examining it closely. It was still up, and wasn't jiggling or loose. The lights flickered again. It felt like he was in a spooky movie, of which Parker had only ever seen one in his life, along with a couple of old thrillers like Alien and Jaws. Even those movies were censored because his mom didn't want him to get too spooked. Was there something wrong with the plug? Parker glanced at the window at the back by the stairs and, just for a moment, he could have sworn he saw something. It looked like the quick flick of a shadow. It was quick, and Parker wasn't even sure if he knew what he saw. He did just step out of his room after all, and he had been staring at his computer screen, which he knew sometimes made shadows appear when there weren't any. He held deathly still, his entire body locking up like a perfect figurine. His body fell naturally into the position as he slowly crouched and laid his hand against the floor, as if he could detect any trembling or motion. He didn't get a chance to investigate for long, though. Before he could make his way to the stairs in his crouched position, there was a knock on the table that made Parker nearly jump out of his skin. "Parker, are you going to bed soon?" Parker's entire body shivered as he pushed himself upright and heaved in a few deep breaths. Every nerve in his body felt electrified. While his heart continued to thrum rapidly, he cleared his throat and called over his shoulder to his mom as the sides of the walls began to open. Yeah, Mom, I'm ready for bed," said Parker. He glanced up at the lights as they stayed on without the slightest hint of a flicker. The walls opened fully, and instantly Parker saw his mom's brow furrow quizzically. "Everything okay? You look a bit pale," she said. The maternal instinct in Amanda kicked in, and she reached forward and pressed the tip of her finger against Parker's forehead. He shied away from it, which was typical teenage behavior. But something else felt off about Parker that Amanda couldn't quite place. Yeah, I'm fine. Parker stopped short. It felt like something physically squirmed in his mind, preventing him from saying something about the shadow and the lights. He shook the notion loose. confused as to why this instinct flared up in him, and proceeded with his thought. I just saw the lights flicker and got spooked. Oh? Amanda replied as she glanced over and looked down at the power strip that fed electricity into Parker's place. Nothing looked off about it to her, but she still knelt and glanced around the ground. Still nothing. Well, she sighed as she stood and walked back over to the front of Parker's tiny home. I don't see anything. It looks like it's all plugged in, but we'll check on it tomorrow, okay? For now, it's bedtime. Yes, Mama, replied Parker as he walked up to the edge and accepted the kiss on his torso that his mom gave him. With that, Amanda smiled and watched as Parker curled under the blankets, forming an almost imperceptible lump in the bed. Good night, Mama. I love you. I love you too, Parker. Sweet dreams, my love. Amanda closed the walls and secured them tightly before tiptoeing out of the room and to her own room to turn in for the night. Just in the other room, Parker laid there with his heart still fluttering nervously. Everything in him was still on edge, and the curiosity of what was going on with the lights was really bothering him. Parker enjoyed a good mystery or puzzle, but he generally liked ones he could solve. This one wasn't solved yet. For what felt like a couple of hours, Parker tossed and turned in his bed as a mixture of homework assignments and curiosities about the power outlet swirled like a mist in his mind. The more the young teen thought, the more it annoyed him that he didn't have the answers. He had had enough. Parker pushed himself up and decided to go and check out the source of the flickering lights. If it was a cable going bad or possibly the breaker being loose, he needed to get a new one as soon as possible. It would be terrible if he were in class and his power went out. His mom said they would do it in the morning, but Parker knew himself, and he knew he couldn't sleep if he didn't at least go and see it for himself. He couldn't afford to not check it out with his presentation tomorrow. The teen stepped noiselessly through his house and exited the front door. As he walked around, he noticed a few things that just seemed, in a word, natural. Sound was amplified. The darkness in the corners of the room seemed brighter. He could feel every tremble in the desk from his footsteps. As he made it outside, a choice presented itself to him. For a moment, he considered going down the climbing line he installed himself on the backside of the desk. But he knew if he slipped on the rope and got hurt, which he never did, his mom would make him take down the line. He decided to risk it. It was late. She was asleep. Parker was as sure-footed as a goat, and knew he would be fine all the way down. The temptation was also too great for the teen to resist. Plus, it would be a lot faster. There was something about the experience that was, in a word, liberating. The free fall, the catch, the feel of the rope in between his fingers. It felt natural. The urge to climb and fall and hide never failed to fascinate Parker. Whether it was something his condition genetically programmed him to do so, or if it was some personality trait he possessed, he didn't know. What he did know was the sensation was addictive, and he was itching for a good climb. Parker snagged the line in between his fingers and leaned over the edge of the desk. There was a mild sense of vertigo that swelled inside him, but he loved it. The weightlessness seized him as he let himself slip over the edge, hands and feet firmly in place and secured on the line. The line burned against the teen's palms and against his legs as he quickly descended. It felt like something a secret agent would do, and it felt epic. The moment Parker's feet hit the ground, he felt himself instinctually look around and crouch low. Silently, he stepped across the planks of wood that constructed the floor and walked toward the power strip that was only a few feet away. The whole thing was 4 times Parker's size, but he navigated through the wires with ease. His hands worked quickly to check the buttons and reset panels, and the teen could find nothing wrong with any of it.
Perhaps something is up with the electrical cover in the wall?
Parker wondered silently. He jumped over the stiff cord that led to the wall and approached the trim on the wall, which had small notches in it, so he didn't need to snag a ladder. As he approached, Parker noticed something by the very base of the electrical cover that made his hair stand on end. It was a drill bit. Flathead. It was a tad bit rusty, and Parker didn't recognize it from his mom's kit that she used to help construct his space. He approached and picked it up, realizing it wasn't as heavy as he thought it would be. In his hands, it was about half the size of the drill bit that his mom used, and he realized he could probably carry it around easy enough. But where did it come from?
I don't think this is Mom's drill bit. How did it get here?
Parker glanced up at the electrical cover and felt his heart skip a beat as he noticed the screw for the wall socket was protruding from the wall ever so slightly. His entire body was shaking now, but he wasn't sure why. Had his mom messed with the electrical cover with some old tools that she forgot about? It didn't seem like her. Parker stepped up on the trim, balancing precariously and using the cord to stabilize himself, as he pushed on the very bottom of the electrical cover. With almost no effort, the piece wiggled free and the screw clattered to the ground. The end looked a lot shorter than the others. He knew because he helped his mom replace the covers a few weeks ago. The young teen took a few deep breaths to calm himself before he dared to peek inside. Engulfing darkness belonging to the wall consumed his vision. There was something exciting and enticing about the darkness in front of him. It felt, in a word, familiar. But why? Parker felt his head beginning to throb as his mind stirred some fragmented memory, but it was hazy and distant. What really set the teen on edge, however, was when he dared to push himself up onto the ledge to peer better into the wall, and noticed something else that made his insides fill with nervous energy. There was something that looked like a pencil mark. 2 lines with a triangle on top, followed by a little check mark on the inside. To Parker, it looked like a kid's drawing of a house with a check mark inside of it. Was this something his mom did? Or was this some kind of construction mark? What was this? What did it mean? The teen stared at the marks and then back to the darkness of the wall. Just like the shadows of the room when he stepped out of his house, the looming abyss of those narrow spaces between the walls didn't seem very dark. It almost seemed inviting. There was something about that confined space between the drywall and the studs and exterior boards that made Parker feel like he was back in his space. It was familiar, but why? Parker hadn't realized that he had been leaning forward to the point where he was barely hanging onto the edge of the electrical cover and leaning into the walls. It took the sound of his foot skidding against the wood and nearly tumbling headfirst into the space in front of him. Startled and shaken, Parker pulled himself back out of the entryway into the walls, forced the electrical cover back into its perch, and hurried back to his room. He was in such a tizzy, the young teen didn't even realize he had gone straight to the secured line he left and climbed up it in record time, ignoring the staircase mere feet away. His little feet barely made noise as he scurried back to his room, securing the door and slipping under his covers without so much as a squeak. Parker's mind was racing. What was that he just saw? And what was that weird drawing that he found in the walls? He hoped his mom would have the answers. First thing in the morning, he would ask her. She would make everything better, right?